So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to Ernesto Savona today. My name is Stefano Caneppele. I'm Associate Professor in Criminology at the University of Lausanne. Our conversation is taking place in Sarajevo at the ESC 2018. And I met Ernesto in 2000 where he was a Professor of Criminology in Trento. Now he's Professor of Criminology and Director of Transcrime at Catholic University of Milan. So I decided to pick up some picture to tell the story of your career, and I start with a B-17 bomber, the Flying Fortress, because I remember that you told us that you were born while the Allies were bombing the city in Palermo. So I took this opportunity to ask about your childhood and how this your childhood can affect the decision to study criminology.
Yeah, well, of course I do not remember when I born, because in some ways only my mother explained to me that I was suffering a lot. She was in a place where she gave birth to me, and the time was really not happy for everybody because there was the airplanes, as you said, to bombing Palermo, and repeating when I was a child and defending me from my brothers. We were a family of 4 brothers, saying always, no, Ernesto should be protected because he suffered a lot. But I don't remember I suffered at all. She suffered for me, by the way. By the way, Stefano, thanks for this interview, but my birth was quite happy in some ways, and my childhood was very happy in a family of the bourgeoisie in Palermo after the war. And not remembering the bombing, I cannot say that this was influencing my choice about criminology. That will come later on, as I will explain. In some ways, when I was young, I was really, and on the end of my high school, I was very much interested in the issues of social problems related to the south part of Italy. And this was the reason why in the Faculty of Law where I was enrolled, I started studying sociology, which comes before criminology. Criminology comes later on. But by the way, criminology came when mafia became a really big issue.
Okay, because I remember that you told us you moved to Rome at the beginning of when you
7 days after my degree.
Okay.
In 1965, I moved to Rome, which was Pro Deo at the time. Today, Luis Guido Carli University, with a scholarship for studying sociology.
Okay, and why you decided to move to Rome and not other city? This was
because I got a scholarship from this Pro Deo, where there was a postgraduate school in sociology that I left after 2 months, and this was the first time I had the opportunity to study systematically sociology.
Okay, so I took another picture of a poster of Roman holidays, and there was the Gregory Peck and Catherine Hepburn with the Vespa and cinema, and there was 2 passions that you have in your life. So how this passion for vehicles and for the cinema affected your career? Could have played a role in what you've done?
Yeah, well, Vespa was the first motorcycle I got when I was 18, and this was the motorcycle which was typical of the 1961 when I got it, and this was the motorcycle that were helping me to do everything in Palermo. I was not driving a car at the time. And the cinema comes in connection with the motorcycle because using Vespa, I went with a camera to take a movie about the ritual Easter in a small village in Sicily, and I was really impressed by the capability to make a movie about the archaeology of Sicily. This was my main interest. But my main interest came out as a movie director, and this was my career. But for some personal reasons, my girlfriend at the time didn't want, I was moving to Rome to study movie director, so she preferred that I was enrolling in the law faculty. And this comes the other thing, that I didn't study law at all, but I studied sociology and sociology of law.
Okay, so it was interesting, the coincidence that when you moved to Rome, there was the beginning of the first mafia war,
Yeah.
and there was, the first victim was Calcedonia di Pisa, who was involved in smuggling cigarettes. He was reinvesting the money in real estate, and I found curious that later on your study focused on investments, investment in the legal sector of mafia revenues, and also smuggling cigarettes and other kinds of crimes that come from organized crime. So this is just the opportunity to leave you the floor to talk about your research interest, your current research interest that you presented about the future of organized crime. So what is changing also in terms of organized crime, and how are you studying? You are studying the phenomenon now.
Yeah. Well, my main research interest was not mafia in the 70s when I went to Britain, UK, Bristol University. I was studying law and social change. So my interest and the discussion I had also with Professor Michael Benton at the time, he was an anthropologist, understanding if law is capable to change cultures and behaviors also. So crime was not there at all. I fully remember when Calcedonia di Pisa and all these tragedy Lazio they call, because I read in the newspaper, but I was not very heavily captured by these events. Later on, when the law Rognoni-La Torre came out in 1982, this was a very innovative law. I tried to apply this law as an instrument of social change, trying to answer to this question: is this law, which is very innovative because it was introducing the mafia association crime and the confiscation of the assets, capable to change something inside the organizational structure of the mafia? And now it comes out that I began to study in 1982 mafia as a part of criminal law, as a part of the instrument for changing the organizational mafia. And of course, when you start a subject, things move ahead, and my criminology interest came as a consequence of this.
And now you were presenting, we were discussing about the changing that is going on the organized crime characteristics, and the question that the law enforcement have on the way that organized crime is going to restructuring. So what are you doing now on the topic? What has changed if you compare Italian organized criminal groups at the beginning of the 90s and today, and how we can study this change?
Well, I think yesterday in my presentation, today I'm working on something which is quite relevant for my personal history, which is I'm looking to the trajectory of mafia from 1982 to 2016 using this powerful database I've been speaking about of all the people which have been convicted. And I'm studying also the future of mafia, what is going on, because I really think that the two things could be read together. The decline of Italian mafias, and I put a plural here because all the four organizations are declining, and what is coming out in Italy and everywhere in the world, because my international interests are there. And in reading the events of US, Australia, Canada, and many other places I do know, you can find the same line which is occurring in Italy today. But if you don't understand what has been happening in the past, and the component of criminal law impact on mafia has been very relevant, this law, I said, you will never understand what could happen in the future.
Okay. So once I heard an Italian scholar who was saying that the European colleagues cannot understand Cosa Nostra on Dante because they were not born in Italy or in Sicily or in Calabria especially. So my question is, at national, international level, being an Italian scholar who studies organized crime is an advantage?
I am very neutral on these things because there are many Italian scholars also in the UK, Federico Varese, other people who are working on mafia's organized crime. Let me say I'm really neutral. I don't think that being an Italian I have an advantage of John Dickey or other people who have been studying mafia. The only thing is that you need to speak Italian for understanding the language of these people.
Okay. So, if you can talk about your achievement and challenges, I took two pictures of the city of Trento and the city of Milan, where you you're not right now, but you founded the Faculty of Law in Trento. You founded the Faculty of Sociology at the Catholic University. And especially in the 90s, you founded Transcrime, the joint research center on transnational crime, which now counts more than 20 people in Milan. And my question is, why did you decide to create Transcrime, and what were the main challenges you had to face?
Well, from the beginning I had quite a strong international interest. I've been with a scholarship in UK and Denmark, many other places. I think for an academic, opening the eyes to other systems is really something necessary. And at my time it was quite unique or rare, let me put it this way. And I thought from the beginning, once I decided to go to Trento instead of staying in Palermo, because I was a lucky person that won two chairs. One, it was in Sociology of Law in the University of Palermo, which was my university. And the second chair was in criminology in Trento. And against any prejudice of people, I make a choice about Trento and not going back to Palermo. I don't know why, but I was feeling to go to Trento. It was a new faculty of law that when I arrived, there were only two professors. I was the third one. There was really something that I was believing I could contribute much better than staying in Palermo. I know quite better with many limits of living in Palermo. And this was the reason why I went to Trento and not to Palermo. And this is the reason why once I was in Trento, I thought that an international experience was part of my, not CV, but should be part of my experience of life. And I remember I was visiting a scholar at Yale Law School in 1988, and I met Albert Rees Jr. there, who was the director of the Department of Sociology. And Albert told me, and I said, why don't you apply for the NIJ position of a project director of research on organized crime? NIJ at that time was the Research Institute of the Department of Justice, but it was the Research Institute, a branch of the Department of Justice. And I thought that this was a unique occasion for having an experience in linking research with policy implications, because I was connected with FBI. I applied and I won. It was very nice, this experience, because the Americans who gave me this contract were a peer review system of the applications, but the people of the NIJ did not know I was Italian, so they did not issue a contract or a visa for me, and I waited with my luggage in my apartment for 3 months getting the visa before going there. After, when I went away, they explained to me there was a big prejudice against me. In Italian, it's coming here, they said, only coffee, girls, and spaghetti. When I went away, I think they were completely different. So my experience in the NIJ, which was done in 2 different periods, about 4 years totally, it was very positive, because I learned a lot about speaking to the people of the Justice Department in the US about organized crime, FBI people. I do not have any secret in terms of data, because they are available, they are made available to me. And this, my research, was really a very unique human and professional experience. When I went away from NIJ, I thought that I could do something relevant, putting all my contacts I had in the United States and at UN level, because I was in contact with UN, setting up a small research unit in Trento. From Washington, I spoke to the rector, say, could you give me 2 rooms and half a secretary, and I will bring you a lot of personal contract. At the time I was consultant to UN and many other places. So what I did, put a lot of contracts, personal contract in the box, and transcribe on the 30th of October 1994 when I came back from the United States, born.
Okay. And with regard to transcrime, what were the main challenges you had to face in managing? This is a very complicated organization. It's 20 people. I took over because you work mainly on PhD candidate. Now there are also associate researchers. But how you were able to build up all this? Because at the beginning you said you were five students, 5 people working.
Students.
Yeah. So how you were able to change it to build this transcrime as it is today?
Well, transcrime starts with a contract with European Union. At that time, European Union was the DG Home today, which is more than 400 people, was only 10 people. So I got a contract. Euro was not existing at the time, which was a quite relevant contract. And with this contract, I set up office, people, and everything else. And after I tried to get other contract in order to provide money for activities there. But my feeling was that research on crime and delinquency should be linked with policymakers and practitioners. From the beginning, I understood clearly that an academic theoretical position on crime without the input of those people who are working in the field, who are issuing policies, it's nonsense. And the business model of transcrime was at that time, you should be doing quite good research, good quality research, which is applied to understanding those people who are producing policies, which are mainly lawmakers, if you want to put it in this way, going back to my origin about law and social change. In some ways, but in Italy it's very much more difficult, law enforcement. So policymakers from the beginning at international level, UN in particular, OECD after, and other governments were mainly stakeholders of transcrime.
Okay. So my question is, people know more about your life after transcrime and during an AJ, but the young Ernesto, while he was a young scholar, what was your career? You said you traveled to UK, or across Europe. Can you tell us a little more about your experience abroad?
Well, my experience abroad, long experience abroad, stops when transcrime came out, because transcrime, it's a business that you need really to manage from the beginning. So it was Denmark when I was 22 years old. It was for a long time in Copenhagen, London, which was the Copenhagen School of Economics. And after there was Bristol University, UK, Department of Sociology. It was 72, 75. And after Yale Law School, law and criminal law, and once again the possibility of using criminal law, and this was the time when I was working on economics and law. It was 1988, and after 1988, it's 1989, starts the NHI experience, which goes until 1994, approximately in 2 different periods. In 1994 I come back to, there is Oxford and Cambridge in the middle, but just for 3 months, no more.
Okay. So one or the 2 big achievements, 2 big challenges that you have to face in your academic career?
Well, as I said to you before, the problem is to persuade people that you can do very good research if you apply to look into the policy implications of this research, which means you need to remember that criminology in the 70s, in the 80s and the 90s was a very psychiatric or theoretical approach, could be in a way, applying in a way which was not applying to forensic science, but applying to policymakers was a very big challenge for this reason. I was cooperating with a lot of people in the parliament, revising the legislation on procurement, for example, understanding all these things. But on the end of the story, there is always the same problem. Policymakers listen to you, but in terms of action, they do as they want to do without any problem. I remember it was very nice when I was studying crime proofing, which was something relevant. It's a part of my scientific activity that is coming out once again today. When I spoke to the president of the Anti-Mafia Commission, say, why don't you use our model in order to proof against crime in the legislation you're producing? And he said to me, Professor, if I do that in the parliament, they will be looking into these instruments in order to produce legislation that could produce opportunities for mafia. So never do it this way.
Okay. So sometimes people who have a successful academic career want to bring their experience back where they were born, where they were come from. So my question is, in your career, have you ever considered to move back to Palermo?
Palermo is the city of my roots, family roots, and always when you have a quite strong roots, as the Sicilian people have in terms of food, psychology, family, and everything else, I tried to go back. I was teaching in Palermo between 82 and 84 when I was in Rome, in preparing myself for the chair in Palermo, which was given to me in the 86, but I left this chair for going to Trento. I went the second time to Palermo to open a desk of transcrime at the University of Palermo. Everything was ready and all the protocols were signed, but on the last day I said, no way, I'm sorry, Rector, I can't do that. So why? We signed everything here. I said, there are no the conditions, the environment conditions. This is my reverie, I said, this is my reverie, I don't come. But on the October, as I said to you before, I'm going to teach in Palermo once again for a new class. It's a contract the University of Palermo gave to me about methodology of criminological research, so I will be teaching there.
Okay, so this brings us to the criminology features in the country, in Italy. So in one of his books, Radzinovich explained that the Second World War almost erased criminological research in Europe, and in Italy too. There was a School of Rome Ferry that totally disappeared, for example. And my question is, at the beginning of your career, you said you come from sociology of law.
Yeah.
There were some Italian scholars who were focused on criminological topics, or not?
Well, my international interest helped me a lot because I met people from UNICRI. UNICRI was the United Nations Research Institute, which was in Rome at that time. And there was Professor Franco Ferracuti, who was a leading criminologist. Also, if he had a degree in medicine, he was more American than Italian. And Franco Ferracuti was one of the main consultants at UNICRI, so I met him. And there was another person who is still alive, Giuseppe Di Gennaro, was the judge who founded UNICRI together with Ferracuti and some other colleagues there. And he was very open to criminology, but not in the psychiatric perspective, because Ferracuti was working with the Americans at the time, which were much more oriented to our other things. So these are the people with whom I've been interacting for a long time.
But in Italy, because also of Lombroso, the criminological discourse was mainly focused on the psychiatric aspects of crime. You are also honorary president of the Italian Society of Criminology, and in 2000 you started a successful master program in Milan. So my question is, what is the situation today, and what do you see in the future for Italian criminology?
Oh, things have changed a lot. For sure, the Italian criminology has its origin in legal medicine and psychiatric. Today, there is a lot of good people coming from there, but orienting in a completely different perspective. I think sooner or later, the young Italians or the young criminologists will be moving toward the Anglo-Saxon perspective, which is much more quantitative or qualitative, it depends on the problem, and publishing abroad. Today still there are some people which have this orientation as a consultant for forensic investigation, but I see that this is not a perspective. In some ways, I'm sorry, but this is a loss which occurred in Italy, also in Germany. Lower criminal law has not been opening to criminology at all, which means this was my first interest when I went to Trento. I was professor of criminology in a law faculty, and I thought this was the right place for teaching criminology. Today, I don't think in Italy you can teach criminology in a law faculty, but this is not going to be the main class.
Okay, so there's still some problem of the position of criminology inside the academic world in Italy. Okay, so we'll go to the international part. I remember that you told us that you did some training for young Cuban criminologists, and you also met Fidel Castro, and you work also in many European and international projects. So what do you think about the characteristics of criminology in Europe compared to US or other Italian and domestic research? What are the pro and the concept, the approach of internationalism of comparative criminology? Because you did quite a lot of you said sociology of law was much more watching it in a comparative perspective.
Well, law is not very present in the American criminology. Law is present in European criminology. In terms of origins, many European criminologists come from law, and this is really an advantage. First. Second, I hope that in the future, also if there is a trend to move through what we call the Anglo-Saxon perspective, we will keep this European taste, not being too much quantitative, but being capable to understand, to do hypotheses, and to discuss issues. Also, if the data we do have in Europe are not dissimilar to the data people have in the United States. I think the creativity of European, and if you want to put Italians, could be a good asset for discussing issues, but mainly we need to link all these analysis to what are the policies against crime and criminals.
So do you think there is a specificity of European criminology compared to other US criminology or criminology in other parts of the world?
It could be if the link between analysis and policies is strong. As I said to you, in the US, the people don't understand what policies means, and law is a main component of policies there. Or they do understand, of course, but if you look there, the law component, it's not relevant. For those few criminologists which are teaching in the law faculties, on the law schools in the United States, they are not really the center of the faculty, they are really marginal. So in Italy or in Europe, criminology could become relevant, not in the law faculties, but in those faculties, and the Università Cattolica is political science at international level, where we can discuss the issues about security, for example, and policies and analysis at international level. We were speaking about how many security classes or degrees are developing in Europe. I don't think all these issues are present in the United States, for example. Europe is launching in the next FP9 after Horizon 2020 a new program about security funding. And it depends how this security funding will be managed, but it's an open door to research on international security.
You work a lot with many European institutions, and your colleagues always admire your capacity to turn ideas into funded projects. So my question is, what are the common mistakes to avoid in submitting a research proposal for policymakers?
Well, it's the experience of transcrime. It's an advantage, of course, because from the beginning we have been we born for doing applied research. Today, the Horizon 2020 program on security, which was launched 3 years ago, is just asking private and public institutions to be together, and practitioners, which are on the edge of this project, to work in order to find solutions on the crime problem or security problems, and we can enlarge. On the beginning, this was the intuition of transcrime, so it could be very relevant to say that transcrime had an advantage for doing that. Today, many other people are doing, but not universities. Mainly is done by private bodies, think tanks, government, police. But once you see when universities are present, you find ICT, information technology. Criminology issues, very few departments are competing for the Horizon 2020 projects.
And this is because what is the mistake they make? Is just to not to be oriented to solution, or just to be not very practical in terms of results?
No, I think because in the DNA of the academics, more in Italy but also in Europe, academics don't want to be involved in projects which request a lot of management, a lot of practical issues, but they are also on the other side a very interesting experience because they put yourself in a contact with languages coming from others. Think about ICT for discussing cybercrime issues. How you can, as a criminologist, discuss without having a person who is an expert on cyber, on computer science. So these European projects are putting people together, working together in a different perspective. And this is really a very relevant thing. This is the direction of the European Union. Is this the direction of the universities in Italy? I doubt.
Okay. Today, you said private and public partnership is practice in research and law enforcement. Yeah. Nevertheless, someone raises doubts about the way the private may manipulate the research outcomes of public priority. What's your opinion about?
Well, in my life I have been always independent. I get money from many different sources, public and private, and I'm still making money on these. Otherwise, in the Università Cattolica, we can't survive. But I have no experience except one, which was a very relevant international institution. At the time, the manager was an Italian prosecutor who gave us a contract about organized crime in a country, and he thought we were investigative journalists, and he was asking us to produce relevant document discovered networks about organized crime and other people. When I explained to him that we are not investigative journalists and we can reproduce much more element than data, the contract was cut.
Okay. So do you think that now the public-private partnership is something that will be the main path to develop a research project and research in Europe and all over the world, or what do you think?
My experience is that if you are really independent, those people are giving you money, they want you are independent. Otherwise, the value of your products are completely nothing.
Okay, so we can just move to your role at the ESC and the role of the ESC in the European Criminology. I just took a picture of Josie Jugatas. She was with you and the others, one of the founders of the ESC in 2000. And how you decided to create the European Society of Criminology? What was the
It was 2000, I fully remember. It was in the Netherlands, at WDC, and for a long time there was a preparation of these, mainly using the model of the American Society of Criminology, because the European Society comes after this model of the American Society of Criminology. Today we are doing the 18th Congress, I think, so 18 years every year doing a lot. And from the beginning I was president in 2003, if I remember, and it was the time of the enlargement of the European Union to other countries. We moved from 15 to 28. And it was a big challenge. I thought it was a good challenge because the experience about crime across the East were completely not known at all. Today, we know a lot. We are doing the conference in Sarajevo. Not really. We could not think about having a conference in Sarajevo when we make the European Society of Criminology. So things are moving, putting Europe with a lot of diversities altogether, and will be a very good advantage for those people dealing with transnational crime, because people are not abolishing borders, but understanding each other in the different cultures. It's something that probably the next generation will enjoy much in dialogues with people of different experience in Bosnia or Balkans or other people. Before the European Society of Criminology, people were much more country-oriented.
You said you've been a DAC president in 2003, and what should be, in your opinion, the role of DSC in the European criminology?
Well, if you put in connection with the European Union, I think the challenge, but it is only a challenge. If you do research policy-oriented, I think this will be a good chance for the European Society of Criminology. The American Society of Criminology, where I go quite often, has a component which is policy-oriented. They are doing very tough policy discussion. I've not heard here. When I was the president, I tried to bring people from the European Commission to come and show what they do, because the European Commission is doing a lot of policy interventions in the area of migration, in the area of crime and money laundering, everything they're touching. But have you seen people here? They don't do anything. So, which means it looks the European academics don't know much about what the European Union is doing in areas which are very important. Think about migration. We are speaking about migration compact. We are funding other countries. There is any discussion here about what could be the best policies for addressing these issues? Are the European criminologists, as per se, putting issues on this on the table with the European Commission? The European Commission, I invited these people, but they are not coming anymore.
And because they don't think that European criminology are a good counterpart to discuss this issue, what do you think?
You need to create links. If you don't create links, otherwise, of course, the bureaucrats don't like academics. The language, the word academics could be used in a very bad perspective. And many Europeans are using academics as academics. But it's up to the academics to avoid this. So I'm sorry to say that many academics are really fully academics. When they speak to the European people, they speak two completely different languages.
Okay, so that's why they do not communicate, you say. Okay.
The reality is that you don't find people from the European Commission here.
Okay, at the first ESC conference, I just took the program in Lausanne in September 2001. You presented a paper on trafficking of women. And after almost 20 years, which parts of development has changed in this market and in the other illicit markets?
If you follow this issue, we are issuing a new concept, which is displacement concept. We are doing, probably we will be doing research on the area, what is changing in the different routes and why it's changing and what are the main variables that put a route on this way.
Because at the time, trafficking women was coming from which part? From eastern part of...
was mainly Albania and Italy was it's a completely different history. And we saw today when trafficking of women, it's coming from the South Africa. At that time it was from the Baltic countries. The Baltic countries, including Albania, were providing trafficking routes and smuggling routes also. Today, Baltic is no more, it's coming from Africa. Different cultures, different countries, different routes. So you need to understand, if you want to really to understand the problem, you need to understand what are the main variables which are changing one route from the other, and why they are moving so fast, because they are moving very, very fast.
You study also other illicit markets, and do you think that this subject will be a main topic of study for criminology in the future? Because otherwise I see there are different prisons, or other topics are, let's say, recurrent and pretty much stable. Illicit market are a bit put aside. Do you think that this is trafficking of cigarettes, or traffic of illegal waste, or other types of illicit market can, except for drugs, can become a mainstream in criminology?
I think it could come, because when you speak about illicit markets, you put a lot of different things together. One is also the structure of the state. In many of the things I've done about illicit trade, I always try to explain to students, and not only to students, how the illicit market develops when the state is fragile. You can read this link between fragility of states and the development of illicit markets everywhere in the world. And it comes out the issue of the regulation. Who is regulating what? And I'm happy to say that now I got funded an observatory on dual markets dynamic at Transcrime, which will be analyzing for the next 3 years how the demand and supply for illicit goods comes out, which is part of the analysis of the illicit markets. But the other issue is about regulation, because regulation has an impact on the illicit markets. Think about drugs, for example. If you regulate or prohibit drugs, illegal comes out. So we need to study together the components of regulation and the components of the economic dynamics. And on the end, and technology also, because illicit markets have a relationship with technology. The three things together are part of this new initiative for the next 3 years at Transcrime with the Observatory on Dual Markets.
Thank you. Yes, you said that you were coming from sociology of law.
Yeah.
Now this discipline is a bit regressed, let's say it's a bit marginal in terms of the academic position in the discourse. So my question is, what is, in your opinion, the future of criminology? Is it in a progressive path, or is it a regressive or stable? In 10, 20 years we will be like sociologists of law today, or do you think that criminology as a discipline will grow, and as how much can grow in the future?
Sociology of law comes out from philosophy of law, but the challenge the sociology of law did not meet was to do empirical science. Renato Treves was a philosopher of law who set up this discipline, and on the end there's very little in Italy about this. There is something in Latin America, but nothing else. But there is a good journal, Law and Society, but it's done mainly by lawyers. And there is a component about lawyers and economists, which are doing a lot of work in measuring the impact of laws on behaviors, for example. That should have been the job of sociologists of law, but today it's done by economists. Well, once again, criminologists in Italy could become relevant in many activities if the criminologists will be capable to understand the impact of legislation, the changes in the behavior or the change of crime, and getting much better data than are available today. This is a very good problem in Italy today, but also in Europe, where the lack of data is not producing very good research.
Okay, so you are positive toward the development of criminology in the future in Europe?
I'm positive. It depends from the capability of criminologists to link the research activity to what we call the policy implications about. Because crime is it's a daily issue which comes to the newspapers. The risk we are running is that crime becomes a fiction.
Okay, so we are just come to the last question. So if you had the chance to leave a message to a young criminologist who wants to start an academic career in the field, what you will say to him? What you are?
Well, feed your curiosity with innovation and tradition.
Okay. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you very much for this
Thanks
conversation.
to you, Stefano.